That's right, we're called cookiers and not cookie decorators. It's shorter for us to say and more complicated for everyone else to understand. That's how we like it. Do-do-do-do, Cookie Smut. For this entire month, January 2021, Burnt Cookies by Mora has been hosting a collab on Instagram called the hashtag CookieGlowUp2021, where she has invited all cookiers to redo cookies that they did before as a way to show off how far you've come, how far your skills have improved, etc. Today, I'm going to show you my cookie glow up, which involves a hand-painted cookie. So I'm also going to be talking through my process and my materials for painting cookies. The cookie I chose to redecorate is one I did in March 2020 that is a play on the classic painting The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. My smutty twist on it is that in mine, Venus is pinching her own nipple and winking suggestively. Instead of The Birth of Venus, I called it The Puberty of Venus. Though I'm choosing this cookie to do a glow up for, there are things that I like about it. I made the cookie cutter myself. It was probably the most complex cookie cutter I had ever done at the time. I also made this cookie relatively early on in my hand painting journey. I had done my first ever painted cookie about 6 months prior, and this cookie, being a person and based on a classical painting, was probably tied for the most ambitious one I had ever attempted. Even at the time of finishing this cookie last year, I was already pretty disappointed by it. It just didn't have as much detail as I wanted, but I do think that I was handicapped by my materials at the time. I don't think I had yet purchased the super fine paintbrushes that I use now. I also think my paints were actually a big contributor to me not being able to get as much detail. I was using Sweet Sticks paints and I was having a lot of problems with the paint streaking. A lot of times my brush was pushing paint around on the surface of the cookie rather than placing the paint where I wanted it, and I also wasn't really able to blend how I wanted. So while there is shading, the lines between different shades are kind of hard like a cartoon rather than a classical painting. So I decided to redo this cookie. I iced it in like baby pink just because it's what I had left over. I was too lazy to make a fresh batch of icing. So the first thing I do is trace my sketch onto the cookie using my projector. And that may seem like cheating, but drawing and painting are actually really different skills, and I'm practicing painting, so that's focusing on color and shadow and dimension as opposed to drawing the outline. By now, January 2021, my painting materials are a bit different. I now do have a set of superfine paint brushes. I think the original Puberty of Venus cookie was actually the one that finally convinced me to purchase them. It actually took me 2 different sets of fine brushes before I found the one that I like. I'll link them down below, but they're actually unavailable right now, and it doesn't say that they're ever going to come back. But I will say, if you do want to try and find some, that they are for painting models. So if you searched for that, you should be able to find some really nice, really fine-tipped paintbrushes. Paint-wise, I no longer use Sweet Sticks. I was never able to figure out how to have the paints reliably not get streaky on me. I've heard that my brushes could have been a part of the problem, but I've since found a product that does not streak no matter what brush I use, and I actually like the finish of it better. That product is from the Sugar Art, is their Elite Color line. The naming is a little bit confusing. They have 2 lines that are named very similar. One is called Master Elites. That's, first of all, kind of a problematic name, but that's also for coloring like icing itself. But the Elite Colors is what I use for painting on top of the surface of a cookie. While Sweet Sticks is sold as a liquid paint, the Sugar Art Elite Color is sold as a powder, so you do need to mix it with a liquid to act as a medium. Because adding too much water on top of dried royal icing might melt or erode the icing away, some people will use high-proof alcohol, which is alcohol, not water, and evaporates much faster when painting in order to avoid that. I did that for a while, but now I just use water, and I'm just careful not to use too much of it. I just prefer the consistency of mixing the paint with water than with alcohol. In terms of how I approach painting, I'm by no means classically trained. I've just hobbled together whatever skills I have through watching instructional YouTube videos or even just watching other people paint on YouTube and just trying to absorb through osmosis. And then just, trial and error. But I guess my main strategy is to lay down my midtones first and then go through and add shadow and end up with highlight. But it's not even as regimented as that. In this case, the very first thing I wanted to do was just try and lay down some white-ish layers as opaque as possible to get rid of that pinkness. The best concrete painting advice that I feel at all remotely qualified to give is just that the more that you can do to improve your eye, to improve your powers of observation, the better you're going to be at producing an image. So for me, a big thing that I'm focusing on is recognizing the different values of light and dark in a painting, because that's what's going to give that depth and dimension. And yes, the more that I train my eye to see that, the more that I'm able to replicate it in my work. I've been adding shadows and highlights to not even just my painted cookies, but even my iced cookies, and it just gives so much more dimension, so much more shape and pop. Though I definitely improved in this second iteration of this cookie, there are still things that I was frustrated with. I think the major thing that shot me in the foot for this version of Puberty of Venus was being a bit lazy about laying down my initial lines. I should have gone back to my sketch and thickened up the lines so I could see them better through the projector, but I just didn't want to. I was lazy. So I kind of guessed a bit when putting down my reference lines, or they were a bit vague. I wasn't very confident in them. And when I went in to add the different colors on top of that, it just added more vagueness and less sureness about where the shadows and the highlights should go. Here you can see me kind of erasing her face with water and repainting it over and over again. And yeah, the places that I hurt the most with this was the face and the hair. The face I redid a bunch, and I did it so much that the water did kind of start melting the icing away, like I warned against earlier. Ultimately, I actually do think I did worse on her facial expression than on last year's cookie. And for the hair, I think the end result ultimately looks fine and certainly looks better than last year's hair, but it doesn't look like the reference painting. The reference painting has just more clearly defined sections of hair, and with those clearly defined sections, there's more opportunity to add that shadow and that highlight. And so I'm just missing some of that depth and detail and fineness to her hair. Also, by the time I get down to the shell, I'm running out of gas. I'm getting pretty tired. It's kind of late at night. So I phone it in a little bit. In that, I'm just kind of hinting at some of the details that happen in the shell. And the shell does have, in the actual painting, it has a bunch of gold on it, and I used my gold paints to do that last year, and I just skipped right over it this year. Could not be bothered, was way too tired. And I finished it off by painting around the outside of her and even on the sides of the cookie in black, just to have her kind of pop forward more and stand out. Ultimately, I'm super happy with this choice. I think it makes a huge difference in the final result. And here she is, Puberty of Venus. In the end, I do think her face is super, super muddied, but overall, she's so much softer and rounder and more shapely than last year's cookie. And here we go. Here's the side-by-side. And here she is, my cookie glow up. And see, it's not a small cookie, but it's a small Birth of Venus cookie, if you know what I mean. Anywho, I'm actually pretty okay with the fact that I'm not okay with this cookie, because it'll give me a thing to do for Cookie Glow Up 2022. And in a year, I think I actually will redo this, probably bigger, just as a way to check in another year from now to see how far I progress in yet another year of painting cookies. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe, and and then if you want to see me do anything in particular, if you have any requests, leave a comment down below. Follow me on all the places. I'm trying to build my TikTok right now because, I'm over 30, so I'm grasping at my youth. So follow me. Cool. Thanks. Bye. Hey friends. Thanks for watching. Do all the things. And see you next time.